John McCAIN. Senator, thank you for joining us on New Day as always. As you know, I'm in eastern Ukraine, so we have what's called intelligence. It seems highly suggestive. The point of analysis here is to say if it's possible that Russia was involved. But let me suggest this, Senator. Why do they have to be involved? These missile systems have been in and around the Soviet bloc area in Ukraine since the 70s. There are plenty of gray-haired warriors still in place here who know how they work, who understand them, who could operate them. Is there a chance that Russia had no contemporary involvement, did nothing right now?
That's impossible, Chris, because we all know that the separatists are Russians and the Russians are separatists. We know the intercepted communications. We know that it takes training in order to operate this particular system. And we know that it was Russia that has caused this whole turmoil in eastern Ukraine to start with. So did a Russian KGB or GRU actually push the button? I think that's really nice to know. But the fact is that this is the work of Vladimir Putin, who caused the unrest in eastern Ukraine, who annexed Crimea, who is the cause of all this. And whether it was actually a Russian or not, frankly, is not too vital in our deciding that Vladimir Putin is a KGB colonel that is an international pariah, in my view, and should be treated as such.
Okay, so let's get to the big question. What are you going to do about it, Senator? Because it does not seem that Vladimir Putin is afraid of the U.S. at all. So for all the talk, what can be done?
Well, first of all, he has every reason not to fear anything we've done so far. It's been less than a slap on the wrist for his annexation of Crimea, the first post-World War II annexation of land by a power in Europe. So he has really nothing to worry about so much, and I really am not convinced that the Europeans will really do much. Look, if we were serious, the French would cancel the 2 helicopter carriers that they are building for the Russians. We would put sanctions on that are sector sanctions, not just individual sanctions or naming individual companies. They would be sector sanctions. But the Europeans aren't going to do that, and the key to this is get energy independence for the Europeans, and maybe they'll show some backbone. But in the short term, they're not going to, and the United States, frankly, is not leading. The President of the United States should be out there on national television pointing the finger where it belongs and telling the American people who's responsible. Then I think you would get a positive response from the American people.
You really think it's fair to say that he hasn't done that? He just gave a speech yesterday where in no uncertain terms, President Obama said that Russia should at least help clear this situation for the investigation. It's not like he's been silent about it. The question is what can he do about it?
Well, first of all, we should lead on sector sanctions. Second of all, the president should be saying exactly what I just told you, that this is the fault of Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin will be held responsible. That should be his opening comment, instead of, well, maybe they have to clear it up. They have to clear it up because they caused it. And so the point here is that Vladimir Putin is literally getting away with murder, and I mean literally, and we are doing very little in response. I think the investigation has to continue. We have to do everything we can to take care of the loved ones and the terrible tragedy that's taken place, but for us not to point the finger of blame exactly where it belongs. There's ample, overwhelming evidence, and not only because of this particular act, but because of Vladimir Putin's continued aggression and fomenting of aggression in Ukraine. The next thing we ought to do, too, by the way, give weapons to the Ukrainians so they can defend themselves. You know, people are stunned when I tell them we have refused to give Ukrainians weapons to defend themselves while their country is being dismembered and invaded.
Kate Baldwin, I want to ask you one more quick question on Vladimir Putin and the situation that's going on the ground We're seeing some reporting coming from Reuters, the news agency, and just read it. A quote from Vladimir Putin in speaking with his security chiefs and defense chiefs. He said this at the top of the meeting, that that Russia was going to use its influence over the separatists to push for a full investigation into the downing of MH17. Here's what he said, Senator. He said, "We are being called on to use our influence with the separatists in southeastern Ukraine. We, of course, will do everything in our power, but that is not nearly enough." I mean, simple question. Do you believe him?
Of course not. Of course not. He's the one that has said that the people who invaded Crimea had bought weapons from local stores. I mean, there's nothing that he said could possibly be believed, and for him immediately to blame, quote, from within Ukraine, when it is his people. Kate, it is his people who are in there who did, I guarantee you, it's his people who trained these people. Now, whether it's actually a Russian military person who pushed the button or not, they had to train these people for a period of time to make them capable of launching this system. And the whole scenario was set up by Vladimir Putin by fomenting this unrest and disorder throughout eastern Ukraine, part of a sovereign nation.
Senator McCain, John Berman here. You said something really interesting to Chris a moment ago. You said if we were serious about Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, the French would stop selling weapons and vessels to Russia. But we, sir, are not the French. I'm not the French. How do you get the Europeans to step up and do something here, since so much of what you seem to think to be the solution here depends on them doing something they've shown no inclination to do so far?
First of all, I was talking about whether our European allies will actually do anything serious, which I do not believe they will. In fact, I'm unfortunately rather confident that they will not. So what I'm talking about is American leadership with sector sanctions that really do have an impact on the Russian economy. The other thing, as I mentioned, is arm the Ukrainians, give them the weapons with which to defend themselves. The United States has to lead. So that if we don't lead, then the Europeans will not follow. But we have to help, and we can within 2 years. We just, Senator Hoeven and Senator Barrasso and I just did a study and a presentation on the floor of the Senate. We can have the Europeans energy independent within 2 to 3 years, and that would change the entire scenario of their relationship with Russia. Right now, I have some sympathy for them. They're dependent on Russian energy. Otherwise, it gets very cold this winter in some European capitals.
Okay, it's Wolf in Jerusalem. I want to ask you a quick question on what's happening here between Israel and Hamas. But just to follow up briefly, I seem to recall that after this crisis of Crimea, Ukraine erupted, the U.S. imposed some sanctions against some pals of President Putin, restricting their travel to the United States. They then, correct me if I'm wrong, retaliated by putting you on one of those sanctions lists. Is that right? And if they did, how has that impacted you at all?
It's wrecked my life, Wolf. I was unable to have a spring break in Siberia. It's been a terrible, traumatic experience for me. But I'll get over it.
I'm sure you will. All right, let's talk about Israel and Hamas. I don't know if you heard our interview with the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, but she was pretty provocative, pretty blunt. She says, yes, Israel has a right to defend itself, but she thought that Israel was maybe engaging in disproportionate retaliation. She said this is hurting Israel's moral authority. She used that word, proportionality. Do you agree with her?
I'm afraid I don't. I think that the sooner that they take out the tunnels, as soon as they neutralize the rockets, as much as to ensure their safety, is more likely the time that this thing's going to come to an end. Well, if this is a tit for, we can't have a tit for tat kind of thing. It's very obvious that the Palestinians are using human shields in many respects in order to protect the areas that they are launching the rockets from, and obviously the Israelis are the exact opposite. I think the sooner that we neutralize the rockets and the sooner the Israelis are able to eliminate those tunnels is the sooner the people of Israel will live in some security. I keep asking my Arizona fellow citizens, how would we feel if somebody was launching rockets across the Mexico border at the United States of America? I'm not sure we would show a lot of restraint.
So So if Hamas, let's say tomorrow or today, were to say, all right, we're going to stop launching rockets and missiles into Israel, we want a ceasefire, do you think Israel should accept that ceasefire or continue, as they say here, a lot of the Israeli military planners, go ahead and finish the job, then talk about a ceasefire?
I think you got to accept the ceasefire. It is what it is. Ideally, I'd love to see everything taken care of, but you know, the Israelis already offered and enacted a few hours ceasefire. A ceasefire is, but look, the world is as is, Wolf. I think that the moral equivalency is out there, which is tragic, and the fact is that the more casualties there are, the more anti-Israel public opinion is fomented, and particularly in some of the European capitals. It's in all of our interest to see it end, but to see it end it would have to be to make sure that those rockets have stopped being landing on Israeli soil.
And the Israelis point out more than 2,000 of those rockets and missiles have been launched from Gaza into Israel, and the Israelis have responded, obviously, very, very ferociously. Hey, Senator, thanks very much, as usual, for joining us, and don't plan any spring break trips to Russia anytime soon, because they're not going to let you in. Clearly, you're on that do-not-travel list to Russia. Senator, thanks very much.
Maybe I could see some of our old Russian interrogators.
What do you mean? When you were a POW in Vietnam?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
I never saw a Russian interrogator. I was only kidding.
All right. Just wanted to be precise. Hey, Senator, thanks very much. Let's go back.